Let's go.
And we're live. Hello.
Oh my gosh. Hey, everybody.
Mika, we need to have like a rule that you're not allowed to crack us up right before going live. Like no mic drop humor before going live. Like that's just not fair.
No making weird jokes while I just like muted myself for a second on there. But in all seriousness, it is Thursday. It is noon, and that means it's time for the Nerd Log. We have one segment this week because one is all we need. And we're going to talk about this State of DevOps report, which I actually loved, and I'm like super excited to get a chance to chat with us about it. We have Elyssa here. Elyssa, say hi to the people. Tell them what you do for New Relic.
Oh, I do this thing called marketing, but it's the geeky part of marketing. So I was a sales engineer for many years, working out in the field, and transitioned over into product marketing to really closely align with product on, partnering on what ends up, ultimately making it into the product, and then deciding how we communicate that to the market and the value and impact that it has to customers. So it's an incredible career. It's an incredible job. So, and I've been doing analytics for I actually did the math. I've been in software for 25 years. I've been doing analytics for 23 years. I
also want to say that
should I be on this call?
That's the whole format. That's
why I was so excited about this report, because it had the numbers in there, and I'm a numbers geek, so I really wanted to dig into the numbers and see what we could determine from this incredible information that's been gathered, and what it means, and how do we really move the needle, right?
I'm super excited to talk about that as I get a beverage from my tiny fridge, because whatever, it's thirsty work. It's thirsty work talking about the future of DevOps. Before we do, I just want to give people some insider information that Elyssa is well known in the department as the person who cares the most about any of this.
Is that?
I would say my rep, quite intentionally, is the person who cares the least. I just about quality, because when you think about it, when you publish something, you published something this week, you went through several rounds of revisions, you made sure it was tax sharp accurate. And I am on the other end, where I'm a Twitch streamer, where it's okay, I'm going to produce, 8 hours of video content in the next 2 weeks, right?
I've been in the Silicon Valley for a really long time, and because my name's sort of unique, I was off the grid for many years, but clients knew me. And so when I made the transition, I love being in product marketing, because you're really at the center of the wheel of understanding the market and what is strategically going to have impact to customers, and partnering with product on influencing, having conversations about where to take the product, and then also creating the content and assets to enable the people in the field to connect with customers and really connect with customers. So for me, I love it, but I'm not used to somebody going, hey, we'll have a meeting with her because we know her name, but not being online and it living forever.
Well, and I've kind of pursued a little bit of a hybrid on that, where I don't put my whole persona forward, where you can read me talking about containers, but you can't read me talking about everything else. And I mean, I know Ali, you're the third point here, where it's
my entire personality is it's highly curated, but it is my authentic self. It is me.
I'm when I started, that was what I was doing. Now all that stuff is on a locked Twitter account, where it's if we know each other, you can go see that, but otherwise it's disappears to the wind. And you and I talked about, actually, right when you started in Relic, that the reason I was hesitant is because I've seen people get boxed in by that persona, where the one that really gets me, and this is, these are some people who I love and have great points of view, but they've gotten the most views for something that was kind of incisive, right? When you're Corey Quinn and you're out there saying this product stinks, this is dumb, this doesn't work, and that's your big brand. And he's talked about this. He says the hard part about that is people keep wanting that.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to kind of, I'm sorry, you're saying.
Oh, I was just gonna say that is one of the perils of just being a content creator in general, and you'll find with a lot of content creators, for example, on YouTube, and this is something I'm really well read in, but like the perils of like content creators is that you can say that you get boxed in, but people and your audience grow over time, and if you're not growing your content with them, yes, that is the content that does do well, but there's a fine line that you walk as a content creator of doing what does well, but at the same time pushing new content and continuing to push that new content until it becomes a thing that does well, and fading out the old one. And it's like a cross. It's like when you're editing a video, it's a cross dissolve. You cross in the two video feeds.
Crossfade.
Yeah.
I mean, in theory, so I'm, director, and I'm focused specifically on log management, because that's sort of, what I've been doing for a long time, but like analytics as a whole, and just how observability and just the state of DevOps and bringing it all together. And for me, what's made my entire career is like focusing on like, you can increase revenue or you can decrease costs. Like there's things that impact value at customer sites. And like, if you focus on those things, like that's sort of, where you, like if you stay in that wheelhouse. And so my problem is kind of like you, Ellie, like I'm sort of opinionated. And so I've been not doing a lot of stuff publicly and in terms of content creation. So I influence a lot of things internally, and then I do a lot of ghostwriting. But I was like, oh, this is going to have my name on it? Never mind. I should have it reviewed.
Yeah. No, I mean,
if it's someone else's piece, just publish. I don't care.
One of the first things that I wrote under my own name was like, hey, I think that there may be more focus on a few other operating systems rather than Linux for server operation. And that was really it. And it got the headline slapped on it, like, you don't need to learn Linux to do DevOps. And like that thing followed me around for like a year and a half. Finally had to pull it down. And it wasn't like people looked at my new stuff and still, were like, oh, she wrote this way back then. It was just more like I was still getting angry comments on it a year and a half later. I was like, yeah, I don't need this. I don't need this. These days, once in a while, I'll get, somebody doesn't like something I wrote. The most hilarious one, I haven't talked about this on the stream before, was somebody who, like, tagged me on Twitter, like, hey, I talk about your article on the show. And he says, on his like live stream, and he goes and opens the article on his live stream and then starts talking about it, but he doesn't read it. He's just like, here's what I see in the headline, and like I'll scroll down and see the first heading, and then he talks for like 20 minutes. And I was like, why did you tag me in this? Like, why did you think I like it was so weird. It was like, but it was the nicest thing, because normally when people are mad about something you wrote, you think maybe they didn't read it. But this time I had proof, which was cool. Hey, you hate something.
Yeah, it was funny because you're saying that I care, and like I put stuff out all the time underneath other people's names, or I review things, or I deal with internal strategic decisions that are made. And I was like, oh, my name's on it. I was like, might need to have some additional people take a look at this before this goes live. Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about this report.
Yeah, let's talk about it, because it's awesome. Like the report was awesome, and I'm super appreciative of Puppet like doing this.
Also,
and it was exciting, to be.
I was just going to say, for context for everyone watching, Elyssa like literally read, what was it, 52 pages? It was like a 52-page report, and then made this awesome summary, which, Nika, if you want to drop a link to the summary.
Yeah, I'll just drop that.
So everyone in the chat. But yeah, she wrote this really awesome summary if you're curious about the article that we're talking about here.
Well, the crazy thing is I didn't just read the report. Like, I took it to Mexico with me. And like, I was really like, I'm really big on, there's noise in everything. There's noise in our communications, in emails that we're getting, in social media, in what's on TV, and our friends, and like, what your kids are doing. There's noise. But if you can like step away from the noise and you can figure out what are the few really key deep takeaways, like what are the pebbles that are going to have the ripple effect, that are going to have the biggest impact. I'm actually really good at that, which is probably one of the reasons I've been employed for so long, despite being really obnoxious. And so, and so for me, I was looking at the report and I took it down to Mexico and I was like, where in this report are the things, like the individual things that people can do that like actually might have the biggest impact on seeing a change next year in the report? And seeing a change in the market.
So then, given that last statement, what is the number one thing that you said?
Is that, oh my gosh, the number one, like there was a couple that really stood out. I mean, first of all, in respect for the report, like they've been doing this for 10 years and there has been significant change and evolution over the last 10 years, but they were also looking at like what hasn't changed all that much in the last 4 years, right? Despite the fact that we've gone from like 10 to 18% in high evolution, like in software world, 4 years is, like dog years, but that's still high growth. But they really, in this report, did a lot to really dig into what hasn't changed. And what hasn't changed is this huge chunk of companies that are stuck in the middle, and really trying to take a deep dive into that, about breaking it down into subcategories and what is it that they're doing, what's different about them. And so for me,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm super curious about this.
Yeah.
This is the second thing I've seen that really decisively says, hey, you're in this tranche or you're in this tranche, right? You're in this category or this category of, leading, following, middle, right? And there's a large middle. Now, when someone says there's a large middle, I start to wonder if we're just looking at just some kind of like, a normal distribution, or really what I'm asking is this. How do you say, how quantitatively are you saying, hey, this person's in the middle? Beyond just saying, hey, everybody who works there says, hey, we're not a market leader for these reasons, right? Like, how you're so into these quantitative values, like I didn't really get that. I missed this in the report.
I think part of it is, in the survey design, and I paid my way through college doing survey design, and so there's the questions that they're asking. I mean, part of it is self-identification, but part of it is behaviors, right? Like, how often do you do releases? Like, what are like when you look at the sort of NIST, like if you look at like sort of what the like key markers are for high evolution. The iteration of your releases, how well you're sort of adopting the full capability of cloud, all those kinds of things. So they're asking those kinds of questions. So I think some of it is self-identification, but it's also digging into, the way that they respond sort of puts them in a category, because it becomes clear.
So
it's an interesting thing that, if you're talking to people who work in these, like, you used to call them IT departments, operations departments, that usually they have a pretty good sense, that like, hey, we may be making money and the business may be good, but in terms of our operations, no, we're not like way out in front, which is interesting, because I wouldn't say, like your salespeople, your product people don't always have that same sense, right? Like where they stand in the market.
Right. And so I want to come back to Ali's question, because I started, I have ADD, so like I can go on a tangent all day long. But I want to come back to your question. The two things that really stood out for me the most, one is the middle is so big, right? So how do you get out of the middle? And when there's a couple sort of key things that stood out. One was the adoption of like all of these organizations are investing heavily, and at the same time, they're not necessarily getting the full value out of it. And one of the key things was really looking at an internal platform as a product so that we can address some of the things like autonomous self-service, and empowering people. And people get into this whole thing of like what DevOps is and is it culture and all this kind of stuff. At the end of the day, what ends up happening very often is organizations will automate some process and people are like, oh, I've got another system to fill out. I've got another this, I've got another that. I'm like, eh. But the individual contributors aren't necessarily seeing the value of the impact to the organization. Like, what does this mean strategically to the organization to move the needle on our uptime or to reduce our error rates, right? Like, if we automate this, like, yes, this is painful to do, but what does this mean for the larger organization, the health of the organization, the health of the market, the health of what we're trying to really create and the value we're providing? And so I thought a couple really key takeaways was, the internal sort of self-service platform and the documenting and communicating the value to not just key stakeholders, but to the individual contributors, because the individual contributors are the people that need to actually go do these things to carry out a lot of these steps. And so you've got to have buy-in across the organization. You've got to have the documentation so that people can truly be self-service, and the collaboration. And sometimes I think that collaboration breaks down where executives are aware of why they're doing something, but like individual contributors are not. And so they're like, kind of going through the motions.
That's why things like DevRel are important to help you communicate that to your developers.
So like just like being able to document and clearly articulate the value that the individual actions have to the overall strategic vision and impact of the company means so much. So that was one of the key takeaways. And the other thing that I thought was really interesting, I was really focused, like was sort of in the middle. The big thing was like, what do you do about these companies that are still on the low? And so
really quickly, in your article, doing this in public, but you wrote like low, medium, and high. I'm forgetting the terms that you used, but were you talking like small, medium, and like enterprise level businesses?
No. It's high evolution. Like, it's from the report. It's like they have highly adopted DevOps practices. They're doing small iterative releases. They can roll them back quickly. They're fully adopting all of the capability of cloud. They haven't like taken something on-prem and put it in the cloud. Like they're fully leveraging it to the fullest capability.
Oh, okay.
And so it's the three categories, and it's about the fact that almost 90% of companies are stuck in this kind of middle category where they're investing time and resources, but like they can't get to that next level where they're fully maximizing, like they're not making full use of all the capability in the cloud. They're not necessarily, communicating the value to all the key stakeholders and documenting things in a way that enables people to be more self-service, and have buy-in across all areas of the organization. So I thought that was really interesting. And then the thing that like really stood out for me, which because I'm like a rule breaker, is they broke down who is like kind of actively supporting, passively not supporting, and actively not supporting. And some numbers stood out. And one of the things was really clear was like, it doesn't matter. Even in high evolution companies they're knocking this out, they have this down, they're still going to run into some barriers. So you have to be prepared to be able to like advocate for, get buy-in, and be prepared to like, you're going to hear no. And what are you going to do about it, right? Because even in the most highly evolved companies, somebody's not going to agree, right? But the thing that was interesting was in the low adoption companies, what I found so interesting was one, the lack of understanding of the value of automation, right? Like they haven't automated a lot. And in addition, half the people don't think it helps their job. So that comes back to the communication of the impact of the organization. But when you look at the low evolution companies, the part that like really sort of stuck out for me, because I'm always one of those like figure out how to get over and over rocks and around things and so this kind of stuff, like to get what you want to achieve, right? One of the things the report said was start taking action. And when we think about start taking action, we're sort of expecting other people to go do it, right? Like somebody else is going to go do this and this is bothering me or whatever. In the low evolution companies, only 13% are actively resisted. So, and like they kind of lumped it together in the report in terms of like, active and passive resistance. But I looked at that as the opposite. Like 13% of the people are actively going to resist you, which means like what is that? Like 87% of the people are not going to get in your way. Like
the phrasing is weird, but if they phrased it negatively instead of positively.
Right. Well, but they phrased it positively, like, go start taking action. And what the report really showed is if you start taking action and going down and adopting some of these practices and documenting things and advocating for them and communicating, that really very few people are going to be actively trying to stop you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it kind of like, I don't want to steal some other company's tagline, but go do it.
Yeah. It's kind of surprising. Like there's very often you find that resistance to automation change is very often much more cultural than it is like, actually someone's going to show up and say no. Because time was, you and I both been playing in this space long enough to remember that you used to say like, hey, we're going to do this microservice thing. And people would come to meetings and just say, no, we're going to stick with the technology we know. We're not switching off of it. We're going to stick with this. Oh, this is a really good comment here. One of the communications gaps that I've observed is that the new Relic tool is generally with DevOps or SRE teams and have a great difficulty to provide the information to the core developer programmers, especially when they cannot replicate the issue in a QA dev environment. Oh, that's such a good note.
So good.
It's not so much about our this report, but it is a general New Relic thing. I would say that is something we are very actively working on, is how do we communicate the insights from New Relic to that developer side. If only there was some way to let people test code changes from New Relic or other ways to pull in developers into the space. Watch this space is what I'll say.
Yeah, that's very, very true. The other thing. So one, it was, go take action, documentation and communication. I personally, because I'm a baby in the security industry, compared with but there's people that have been in security for 25 years that are still there's still so much to learn. But I spent quite a few years focusing on security in my analytics career. And one of the things that I think is important is that there was a part of the report that was the discussion. There's the discussion about risk and being risk adverse, and how damaging that can be to be risk adverse. But also the sort of discussion about are we calling it DevOps or DevSecOps, and the name, the numbers really prove out that it's really important for organizations that we really start in the high evolution companies that are really doing this well. They're implementing security throughout the entire life cycle, right? They're not reacting to just when something happened in production, they're building it in. And the thing that I think is interesting about it is because it's so critical to the market, to company success. I mean, people don't realize how dangerous and how expensive breaches can be. And we're putting all of this critical information in these systems. And so that the funny thing is companies have to decide. I mean, I used to do financial planning, and they have to decide where budget's going to go. And so for me personally, it was like, one, there isn't really any debate. The numbers clearly show we need to start to move high evolution. We need to start involving security in more phases within the DevOps practice, within the development DevOps life cycle. But the thing is that when you do, coincidentally, money becomes available because security is so critical to company success, because the risks are so real. And so not only are you doing the right thing for your company, and you're taking you on a path towards evolving your DevOps practice, and potentially moving out of the middle into that high evolution, but you're tying to where companies have to decide where they're going to invest and where their dollars are going to go. And the dollars are frankly going to go to security because security is so expensive if there is a breach. And so for me, it's like you're not only doing the right thing for the company, in doing a better job of not being reactive, but really building security into the DevOps lifecycle. And so people are getting into this whole thing of the name debate, and I'm like, one, just do it again from the report, like start actually doing the change, and two, that's where the money is that's going to fund the change. So that was my big
Yeah.
I mean, also, I'll just say, just for anyone watching, if you have those decisions for budget allocation, give your security teams more headcount so they can handle those data breaches and be able to handle those requests and be able to help every single aspect of the DevOps cycle, because I don't know a single security team that is well staffed enough to handle so much. So it's like, make sure that your security teams are well staffed, and when they're asking for headcount, give them their headcount, please. That's just me advocating for the security teams, not to you.
Yeah, it's advocating for the security teams, and it's also, it's that cross collaboration and figuring out where security fits within an entire organization. And is it something sort of separate, or is it something that you build into your processes? Anyway, yeah, it's something I'm super passionate about, just because, you see it on TV and it's like, oh, you watch an episode on TV and like the bad actor ended up being some 22-year-old in a basement. And it's like, that's not the real world. Like there's constant attacks, constant threats going on. And breaches are incredibly expensive. I mean, if a bank is breached, just the cost of having to notify customers, the loss in brand dilution. Like people not feeling comfortable shopping in your store or using your website, like all of these different kinds of things, much less safety for things like, power grids and all this. Data's valuable. And especially, I love, we, just obviously we're the first, fully certified HIPAA compliant observability platform. Absolutely. I know.
That's so awesome.
I know, which is so important for logs and across everything. Like not just logs, like this is like full observability, like metrics event, like the full melt, if you will. And so anyway, so to me, I'm really passionate about that because, but the takeaway is, one, the high evolution companies that are doing DevOps really, really well, they are building security in at all the various layers. And if you want to be able to do that, like the money exists for security, so it can help sort of fund. And security has the same issue, like the lack of resources of people. Like the more stuff that we can automate.
Yeah. So we have a comment from Sean in Idaho, and is the report actually showing that most companies don't clearly see the value of getting to high evolution? Now, I'll say, since the report is mainly covering people who are working kind of directly in this area, they often don't necessarily know the exact reason why they're not really getting to this, cutting edge point. Now, I would say, I don't mean to slay this engineering group. They're great people, and they wrote a really cool article about migrating to Kubernetes. But there's an article on Medium from the Tinder engineering team, which I point to all the time, because it says, here's how we spent 2 years and easily $1 million. And at the end, as we migrated to Kubernetes, and at the end of it, it says it used to take 7 to 8 minutes to deploy code. Now, it used to take 12 minutes to deploy code. Now it takes 7 or 8 minutes to deploy code. And I shit you not, that is the only benefit that they identify in this long, long article and this huge amount of money. And I do think that there are plenty of people who say, no, I want to drive 55 miles an hour, right? Like, what's the absolute, what are iRobot doing? What's Netflix doing? I don't want to do that. I want to do what's back here that feels a little safer. And I think that while most people, when they talk about something like security automation, right, they're not necessarily making the argument of, well, I don't want to do what the best performers are doing. But I do think there is this pressure organizationally, not to say, it used to be 6-7 years ago, you had people who said the technology that worked for us in 1995 will work for us forever, and we are sticking with it, right? Now, everyone knows that change is a permanent state of affairs, but Correct. There are people who say, I want to be using stuff that's 2 years old. When you start saying to a certain boss, this thing is the newest, it's the fastest, it's the best, it outperforms, they start thinking about stuff like MongoDB and other tools that came in promising crazy benefits that did not deliver. Right. And not that they didn't deliver any benefit, but that the idea of when I'm sitting at my stereo system and someone says, oh, this device just came out. It's like, I don't know. I don't think so. Like I have needs from that. Like a stereo system is a pretty good one. I have needs from that system that haven't changed in 50 years. Right. So I just wanted to be able to do that. And when someone says, hey, this is this device that's sparky and flashy and everyone's using it, I'm like, I don't know. No, thank you.
If
you told me, hey, this thing's been out for 15 years and it's been working great, let's adopt that. Right? There time was people told you that SQL was just leaving these shores and it was disappearing, right? And yet still you find these technologies going strong. Well, so I'm interested in that. I'm interested in that there are people who are saying, hey, let's decelerate here.
Well, so yes and no. So the funny thing is, I mean, I do think, yes, things can run amok, right?
Yeah.
But, when people become so risk adverse, they end up introducing more risk.
Yeah.
And I'll be really candid. I've been in high tech like forever. I am a late adopter. I'm not the person standing in line for the latest version of a phone. I should be. I'm not. My kids are. But when you start looking at what we're talking about within high evolution and like doing it's small incremental releases, things that can be rolled back quickly, automating things that reduces the risk of human error. These are real tangible benefits. And I want to come back to, you were like, I missed half of this brilliant, like mic drop monologue that you just did. Right. But I caught the minutes at the end. If somebody had attached dollars to those minutes, it'd be a different discussion. Right. Yeah. Because when you go from, 12 minutes to 7 minutes, what's the impact to the organization? Financial impact. What's the impact to customer retention? What's the impact to whatever it is, when you can actually then tangibly actually understand the impact, to the top or bottom line of the organization, all of a sudden a change that seems really small, all of a sudden you realize how big it is.
Yeah.
because that change in minutes might have resulted in a savings of, $50 million, and it only costs $1 million.
Yeah.
Right. But you don't know that. So I think part of the difficulty in being in tech is we get so wrapped up in features and we get so wrapped up in how things work. We've got to, as a industry, all of us putting on our technical hats. At the end of the day, everything that we do has to tie back to serving the value of the business, serving the value of customers. Like, our business exists. We make software, we develop something to deliver value to customers. And you've got to be able to connect the dots and translate that. And that's true for change in an organization too. So if you want to have the change in your organization, carry through with that last part to try and capture the tangible impact to the people, the processes, the employee retention, the cross account use of, like, when customers like now proliferate and use other parts of your product, the reduction in spend, the increase in reliability. So
Falcon has a great question here. Sorry to interrupt, but that's why I do on Twitch.
Yeah,
which
basically,
is
small changes, document the dollars.
Yeah, and that really is it, right? If you can quantify the difference, and frankly, for the Tinder team saying, hey, we cut deployment time by a few minutes, you really could say, hey, let me show you how many more deployments that is a day and what that means for the business, right? It really could mean something.
That's it, yeah.
Falcon has a good point here, where a lot of people, when they hear more, better security, feel like that means more restrictions and stuff not happening. And in fact, sort of think of security as being the enemy of DevOps agility, right? Like, the example, of course, most people on this channel are going to remember is they remember fighting with security to get New Relic installed. And in fact, when I was working in New Relic at tech support 6-7 years ago, it was absolutely that, you would basically just have security teams say, like, no, that's not going to happen. We're not going to do that. Oh, well, we'll do it this way. We'll send data this way. No, the answer is no.
I mean, like, if you keep it, it's a failure. I feel like it's a little bit of a failure on both aspects of understanding, on the developer aspect, understanding what it means to have a security issue come up, both from a company, a brand, a dollar sign, and a human perspective. Again, the human perspective of who's saving the companies, but when breaches do happen, I've seen it firsthand how it can, like, really ruin some people. But then at the same time, a failure on security for having clean and orderly communication and ability to communicate clearly with the developers of what those steps are to get products approved, and to be more willing and understanding to hear developers when they ask for new things. So it's an issue that needs to be solved on both ends.
And starving a security team of funds is not going to mean that starving a security team of funds is not going to get your applications deployed more easily, right? And I was thinking, check out some of Ian Coldwater's talks. Ian's talked a lot about this, about how you can emphasize security, and that means it's easier to deploy software and get software out. And yeah, they've got a lot of smart stuff to say about that.
Yeah, and it's such an interesting topic because people are so used to security saying no, and to be candid, like, back in the day, like, I was one of those people like turn off patch updates or whatever. You start seeing the downstream trickle effect of, like, what it means as an individual, what it means for companies, the data that's out there, and most of us go through our daily lives not realizing how much risk is out there. Like, that there are organizations that, like, they have, like, high compute and, like, resources and people and machine learning working 24/7 to try and steal identities, to try and get in. Like, apply your patches. Like, and so the more that you can sort of, like, and it comes with security too. So the security folks are technical folks as well, right? And so it becomes both groups being able to communicate, like, this is what I need and why, and the value and impact to the business. And this is why what we need for security and the value and impact or risk to the business, right? And how do we marry those together? You know?
Yeah.
Anyway, how are we doing on time? Like, I don't know. I'm just hanging out. Like,
Sean in Idaho says security cannot be the anti-productivity team, and I really feel that. I think security automation is a really good way to handle that. Is to say that, explaining security automation is this frees security people up to make the actual exceptions that you need to poke holes in the firewalls that you need and do the other stuff that you need to have happen, instead of leaving them to like do their own port scanning and do their own system scanning and stuff that should be automated. How are we doing on time? I don't know. We're doing fine. Everything's great. Okay, so this last thing, there's a last thing I want to talk about this human side, which was mentioned in the report and is definitely the thing that I see as the big theme, is that data residence is something that Falcon mentions here. This is, of course, is a kind of a new thing in the world. We're dealing with data sovereignty in the last 3 years that really wasn't that much of a concern previously. But the big thing is human power as the limiting factor in your DevOps ability for growth. So, time was you had people desperate to buy RAM and desperate to buy hard drives and desperate to buy like rack space and IO pipe.
Let's just be real. Right? People are still desperate to buy GPUs.
We're back with the microcontroller shortage. Yeah, I mean, we're back to these things in some ways. And it's funny because this used to be like a total mic drop thing for me to say right before the pandemic, which was like, when's the last time you heard of an IT person who couldn't buy enough RAM? Right. Which now, okay. All right. Admittedly, but while it's a little tough to get your, GPUs or what have you, the difficulty of hiring a Kubernetes expert, right? The difficulty is saying, oh, we just need like 6 people who are really good at Docker, Kubernetes, really good Linux administrators, have some hacking experience. Oh, and they've got to have their, 2013C classified documents clearance, right? Never going to happen.
Never going to happen.
That team won't make a single hire this year, right?
And just like, that's so frustrating because this is an issue I'm seeing with a lot of peers around my age. Everyone's wants to hire developers, but no one wants to hire the new kids. Everyone wants to hire experienced people, but how do you get experienced people? By hiring the inexperienced people and bringing them up. And it's a failure on the system right now to not be willing to bring up those people to that level.
And I do think, I think we're seeing some shift with that, but, you just saw this story from the Terraform team.
Oh my God,
where, I mean, Terraform's a major tool on the internet, and they just said, no new PRs to Terraform, which that could sink that. I mean, I don't even know what's going to happen in the future, but I mean, that like putting that out there saying, hey, we're so short staffed, we can't handle any PRs. So our supposed open source tool, and again, this is something that is industry-wide. This is not specific to that team or that group. That's just a symptom of a larger problem where staffing turns out to be your limiting factor, right? It's not, oh, I can't buy virtual machines. I can't buy server space. I can't buy, bandwidth or whatever else. It's realistically, we're not going to have someone in this role this week or next month.
Well, and even if you can, you're competing with them, right? Yeah. And so I think this comes back to the report, like when you start developing an internal platform that enables people to be more self-service and documenting really well, you enable people to and you're automating more, it takes some of the pressure off of, because there really isn't. Not like you're going to go knock on a door and it's like, oh, look, here's like 5,000 developers. I think one of the things, I actually was talking to a friend of mine who's like this, like, I don't even want to explain, but he's like super guru in DevOps that likes to hide. And so he was talking to some companies and it's like, why did they develop in this like random language or whatever? And because it has some random, and part of it is we have to put a stake in the ground in some ways in terms of like standardizing on things, standardizing on on OTel, standardizing on frameworks that we're using. Like we've got to standardize on things because because when people start going rogue and going off and like, I'm going to reinvent, and like, now I've got a new framework and I've got a new language.
Yeah.
Like the difficulty is now all we've done is just diluted the skill set even more, and there's fewer people. And so I want to see like this, incredible evolution in terms of us documenting well and making people more self-service so that we can hire people that are earlier in their career, right? And so that we, people can be more autonomous and be able to do more without having to like go through so many processes. And at the same time, I think we have an obligation to I hate to say be less creative, but let's put a stake in the ground in some certain areas, because if we just keep going creative and going rogue on every single framework, every single language, every single process and everything, then all you're doing is diluting the workforce to the point where you've got 2 people that know how to do that, right? And you can't hire them. Everybody's fighting over them.
Definitely in the next few years, that the question of, why are we using this particular framework, it's about the people that you could hire to do it.
Right.
It's not going to be about, this was this for this 19 reasons. It's going to be, this is who was available, right? We got 5 people together who could all write in this language. And so that's who we're doing it. And in fact, Falcon mentions another one, which is another thing that is covered in this report, is that separations of automation, obviously, right? You can see how that helps your human side problem, right? If you're reducing the number of people you need, obviously that's great. Separation of concerns is another one, where the better you do from an architectural side, the separation of concerns, the easier your hiring is going to be, because you're not looking for DevSec automation AI ops person, right? You're just saying, hey, I need somebody who specializes in these 2 tools, right? On that note, I think we should start to wrap up. I mean, we've said a lot. Go read the article. Go read the book.
Yeah.
Don't just watch the movie.
Yeah. I mean, you can read my summary, but read the article. The report, the report is available. There's details. There's nuggets of goodness I didn't even touch on in there. I tried to hit some of the highlights. If we're going to wrap up, I want to say this. I did this as the final point, and I had a technical writer that was like, oh, you've got to put that in a slightly nicer, sort of way, or put this in a little bit more of a gentle, more acceptable, out in the world way. But one of the things that stood out for me was we're all inundated with surveys and information, and they've done so much to try and, to put this survey out there to get as broad of a response as possible, right? But when we look at the responses, it's very, very heavily weighted by geography. It's very heavily weighted by industry. And so when the report is talking about change and being the change in your own organization, you can't change what you can't measure. And one of the things we need to measure is we need a better representation and measurement of the true state of DevOps, which means next year, if you see that email, please take the survey. Take the survey, because we want to see the world represented. We want to see broader industries represented. We want to see large and small organizations represented. And when we have a larger data set, it's going to lead to better insights that lead to better recommendations on how we can drive change. And so if you do nothing else, take the survey next year, because then you become part of what we're measuring to be able to improve everything for all of us,
Wow. Yeah, I really feel that. And I, come look us up. Come look us up on our community hub or take a look on Twitter. And if you see stuff in the report where you say, hey, that's not been my experience, we would love to hear about it, because I am super curious, especially if you feel like, hey, we're the exception to this rule. Like I would love to know that. Folks, I think we're going to start to wrap it up. Now we have a few plugs to make. Ali, I understand we're in the middle of a big whole Twitch event hoedown with the Relicans. Is that right? What do we got on?
So here on the new Relic channel, the Relicans are streaming literally every day. Not next week because we're going to be hanging out together, but we're literally streaming almost every single day this month, and we're going to be on this channel every day as frequently as we can, unless we're like literally at an event, which we will be live streaming at events, which I don't know if I'm allowed to say, but if you're watching this right now, you just got a super secret sneak peek of finding us at conferences. Then we are also doing some really big live streams this month. So today, if you missed it, Aaron Bassett Dev was live streaming about an article he wrote. And then later this month, the real Christian is going to be live streaming about his article that he's writing, which is really exciting. But if you have like any questions, we're going to be live on this channel every single day, almost, asterisk. So definitely go find us there. Find us here.
I love it.
I love
it.
So, as we've established, you probably don't have a SoundCloud album coming out or a Twitter account, Elyssa, that we should be following, or probably a TikTok. But all of those things you can find out serverless_mom on Twitter or at serverlessmom on TikTok. And also look for me on Twitch at serverlessmom. And come back next week.
No, come back tomorrow for you and me. Back on this channel.
Yeah.
We'll be back here tomorrow, live streaming about 8 p.m. versus observability for people who might have questions.
Love it.
Yeah.
Okay, on soon.
So I'm going to lead a raid to a good friend of mine, Cassidy.
Nice.
So in just a few seconds, will send everyone over. But thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Bye.
This has been awesome, and I missed you both already.
Bye. Thank you.
We got a coffee chat more often.
Oh,
yeah,
please.
We gotta do this again.